The nonpartisan pollster Charlie Cook stated recently that he would be, quote, very, very surprised, end quote, if Biden beat Trump in November. That is due to Biden trailing Trump in battleground states by wide margins. Biden could win the popular vote by 4% and lose the election due to failing to win 270 electoral votes in the Electoral College. So another 4 years of Trump as president is a very real possibility at this time. Trump doubled down on his efforts to undermine NATO's deterrence value at a South Carolina rally. This is what Trump had to say. Quote, look, if they're not going to pay, we're not going to protect. Okay. End of quote. He left out the prior invitation that Russia could do whatever it wants in Europe. When analyzing this Trump statement and others, the first question is what does he mean by pay? With Trump, he may not know what he means or have such an inadequate understanding of what pay means in terms of the NATO Treaty or NATO policy statements, or that there is a difference between the treaty obligation under Article 5 and a policy goal which is not binding on its members. It only takes a minute or so to read the NATO Treaty, but I doubt that Trump has done so. Pay or dues, another word used by Trump, are not appropriate words to use unless Trump was referring to NATO assessing dues payments for its day-to-day administrative operations. All 20 members are current in those dues. Trump probably is unaware of that fact, and one purpose of a cross-examination on this subject would be to demonstrate his ignorance. And as a demagogue who spends no time learning anything that is accurate, the extent of his ignorance would be extensive. There is a policy that NATO members would spend at least 2% of their GDP on defense. The NATO Treaty and Article 3 merely states that the member states will, quote, will maintain their individual and collective capacity to resist attack. End of quote. It doesn't set any guidelines as to how much money each country has to spend. A failure of one country to spend at least 2% of their GDP on defense does not relieve the other members from defending it when that country is attacked. So the question to Trump in an examination would be something like this using a hypothetical. Bulgaria spent 1.8% of its GDP on defense in 2023 and is invaded by Russia in 2024 with the intent to absorb that independent nation and democracy into the Russian Federation. Bulgaria invokes Article 5 of the NATO Treaty, and Mr. Trump, as president, elects not to come to Bulgaria's defense because it only spent 1.8% rather than 2% of its GDP on defense. So the answer that Trump would have to give to that question is that no, he would not come to the defense of Bulgaria. So in effect, that's an invitation to Russia to invade. But then assume after successfully absorbing Bulgaria into the Russian Federation, Russia uses its then superior position to attack Romania. That does spend more than 2%. What does Trump do then? He can't really do much of anything other than watch Romania be absorbed into the Russian Federation. Trump liked Putin's recent statement that he would prefer Biden over Trump. The reason given was that Biden was more experienced and predictable than Trump. Trump said it was because he was so tough on Russia. Give me examples, Donald, so I can ask you about them, of how tough you are on Russia. You will be stumped to give anything concrete, but will just simply spew more BS. I would expect Putin to make that claim because Trump is his guy, and it is becoming increasingly evident to voters, particularly the old-fashioned Republican voter, that is the case. Trump could lose the election on conservatives abandoning him on his subservient to Russia's interests, his statements on NATO, and his efforts so far successful to obtain conditional aid to Ukraine. So Putin is basically just trying to tamp down on the growing concerns among many U.S. voters that Trump is doing his bidding. It does not matter whether Putin is paying Donald or has compromat on him. Everything Trump says and does is what Putin would want an American president to say. I published a video on that subject, which I will link in the More section below. So if you could cross-examine Putin, what would you ask him on his comment about preferring Biden over Trump? Ask him whether he is in favor of a $65 billion aid bill for Ukraine that Biden is trying to push through Congress, or whether he favors Donald's position that has so far killed that legislation. Or ask him, does Putin favor Biden's strong support for the NATO alliance and the sanctions that he has imposed on Russia for its Ukraine invasion? Or does Putin favor Trump's statements on U.S. NATO treaty obligation? Or Trump conditioning some military aid to Ukraine when he was president on investigating Biden and coming up with the conclusion that that would help Trump in an election, even if the facts do not support that conclusion. As a result of thinking analytically about Putin's claim that he prefers Biden over Trump, which is a preposterous proposition, the only conclusion that can be reached is that he is trying to help Trump with that claim.